Okay, let's look at the menus now. Start with the edit menu. Okay, now a lot of this stuff is standard commands. Alright. At the very top we have undo, and it tells you whatever the last thing you did, but it basically is just undo, Command Z. But it's a standard function, Command Z undo, so there's no need to go to the menus for that. You should know that Command Z is undo, and it you know, you can undo going back and back in time. You know, I drag 4 notes up in pitch. I can just do Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z to return them to their pitch. Yeah. Okay, so a lot of this stuff is just standard function commands that we should know already. Undo, you don't need the menu for that. You know what undo is, Command and Z. Cut, copy, paste, delete, select all, deselect all. These are standard commands you should know. Okay, you know, so we don't need to bother with those. So undo history, that's worth looking at. It's useful. You bring up your undo history, and it's a list of everything you just did. Right, so you can, you know, you can just click on any of these points. It takes you to the state that the notes were in, that the edit was in at that point. And then when you've got the state you want, you just click the undo button to fix that state. Okay. Your undo history is it will remember 30 edits that you did by default, but that could be changed. You go to Logic Pro Preferences General, choose the Editing tab, and there's your number of undo steps there, which can be made more or less. By default, it'll remember 30 things that you did, which then appear in the undo history to be selected. But you can make it more if you want, or less. All right. So as you can see, this this edit menu from here down to here, they're all standard commands, apart from the undo history, and also this paste at original position and paste replace, which are just variations on standard paste. So let's look at paste at original position. Standard paste is of course Command V, and it pastes whatever you've copied in at the position of the playhead. Okay, but let's look at these two special pastes. Paste at original position. Okay, I've got this green region highlighted. I lasso this chord, Command C to copy, choose the red region above, no need to position the playhead this time, paste at original position, and it pastes that chord in at exactly the same position in time. Yeah, into a different region. Okay, so that's very useful for transferring patterns, individual notes, chords, etc. from one pattern to another at exactly the same position in time. Alright, very useful. Alright, so I'll undo that. The other special paste we have is paste replace. Let's look at that one. Again, I'll highlight this chord, Command C, copy now. This time it does matter where you position the playhead. It's like a regular paste. In other words, what you paste in will be pasted in at the playhead position. But this time it's paste replace. So we do edit, paste, replace. And any other note whose start time overlaps the pasted in notes is deleted. This note here wasn't deleted even though it overlaps the pasted in notes, because its start position doesn't overlap them. But these three notes here, their start positions do overlap the pasted in notes, so they're deleted. Okay, that's paste replace. So these two are useful. They're not used that often that you need to assign key commands to them, and hence they don't have key commands by default, but be aware they're useful. Okay, so learn those two. Okay, now these ones that follow, these are useful, some of these, and these are all sort of special selects for selecting specific things, and all these special select commands are easy to learn in terms of their key commands. You don't need to go to the menu to perform those functions. Just learn the key commands, which are very easy. All these special select type commands all begin with a shift and then have a letter following it that reminds you of what they are. So select all following, shift F for following. Invert selection, shift I for invert. Select muted, shift and M for muted. Select equal coloured events, shift C for coloured. Down here, grayed out, select equal sub positions, yeah, which is Shift P for select equals sub P for positions. Yeah. So let's look at the useful ones now. Select all following, very, very useful. Shift and F, dead easy to remember, and it's a really useful command. You just select a note, then do Shift F, and everything following that note in time is selected. Brilliant little command, that Shift F. Select all following, very useful. Shift F. All right. Then you have this slight variation on that. Select all following, but of the same pitch, so that the key command is just a variation. It's Alt, Shift and F. That is another very, very useful command. We already know we can click on a key on the piano at the side here, and it selects everything on that pitch in the edited region or regions that we're editing, right? So a very, very easy way to select all notes of the same pitch. But this Alt Shift F variation on select all following, which is select all following of same pitch, is useful because you just select a note in that row that are on the same pitch and then do Alt Shift F, and it selects all following that selected note on the same pitch. Very useful little command, that. Alt Shift F, select all following of the same pitch. That's useful. So just be aware of that. Learn that key command, right? Select inside locators, easy to remember. Shift and L, but rarely used. But obviously what it does is, if I set my locators left and right to here, so that they are covering just the inside of this region, okay, you must have the piano edit highlighted as the active editor for these key commands to work. So make sure that the piano roll edit is highlighted. Now I do Shift L for select all inside locators, and quite obviously anything with a start position inside the left right locators is selected. Occasionally you may want to do that. It's not that useful, but there it is. It's be aware of that command. Okay. Alright, what else have we got? Invert Selection. Now this is very, 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 very useful. I mean, what's easier? I want to select everything in this pattern other than this row of yellow notes. What's easier? To go like this and lasso that lot, and then hold down Shift and lasso everything below. Now I've selected everything other than that row of notes on that pitch. But it's much easier to just click the key to highlight everything on that pitch. Then you do Shift I to invert the selection, and you've now selected everything but the notes on that pitch. Yeah, very, very useful. Okay, so that's another useful command, easy to learn. Shift and I to invert selection. Okay, deselect all. Well, it's a standard command. Shift Command A, but again, you just click on the background to deselect. So. No point learning that one really, but it's a standard command. Deselect outside locators, rarely used, don't bother with that. Deselect global tracks, don't even know why it's in there, forget that. Select empty regions, forget that. Select overlapped events, well, it doesn't have a key command, it's rarely used, but to show you what it is, I'll just choose my region and then do select overlapped events. Now it doesn't mean notes that are overlapped like this, where one note overlaps another on the same pitch, right? It doesn't mean that. What it actually means is select overlapped events. It's the selected and events now are overlapped, meaning there is another note that overlaps them in time, vertically above or below. That's what it actually means, alright? So it's not that useful, but bear in mind there it is. Select muted events, incredibly useful command, especially when used in combination with invert selection. Shift and I and Shift and M, very, very useful pair of commands. So let's look at that. It's incredibly useful. Let's say you've got your mute tool and you've gone around thinning out the pattern by muting notes. Okay, so we're just muting out notes. So we've muted out all those bunch of notes, and there's a whole bunch of notes strewn all over the pattern, muted at different positions. I can't quickly lasso them or anything like that. But, I've muted them for a reason, because I want to hear the pattern without them, and so I play it and I think, okay, fair enough. Now, if I then want to highlight all these muted notes, to unmute them, I've got to either go around and click on them one by one with the mute tool, or use the pointer tool and Shift and left click, to bring the notes that are muted into my selection one by one to then unmute them. Yeah, or I just do Shift M. Select all muted. I mean, there you go. You know, you can't get easier than that, can you? Now that they're all selected, I can unmute them by either clicking on any of those highlighted notes with the mute tool, or by just clicking the M key on my QWERTY keyboard, which is by default the mute and unmute key command. So I shall press M and unmute all those muted notes. There we go, they're all unmuted. Now with the Shift and I invert the selection to now select all the other notes that weren't muted before, and now I can use M to mute all those, and now I'm listening to the opposite lot of notes unmuted. And all the black highlighted notes are the ones that are muted. Doesn't matter whether they remain selected, because even if they're unselected, I now do Shift M and select all those muted notes, press the M key to unmute them, Shift I to invert the selection to the other load of notes, and now mute those. And now I'm listening to the opposite bunch of notes. So Shift and M to select all muted, incredibly useful, and in combination with Shift and I, very, very, very useful. Okay, let me just unmute these. Shift and M, select all muted, press the M key, they're all unmuted. Click the background to deselect all. Okay, this is another really useful one. Select equal coloured events. Very easy to remember. Shift and C for colours. Well, by default, our notes are coloured by velocity, so it actually means click a note, Shift and C selects every other note of the same velocity. In other words, the same colour, which by default is the same velocity. So that is very useful for selecting a note. Shift C then selects every other note in the pattern of the same velocity. Then get the velocity tool and drag all those notes of the same velocity up and down to have a new velocity or something like that, right? Very, very, very useful. Okay. But if you are working on two regions in the same edit window from different tracks, you know, you can put your view into region colors for the note colors, as we showed previously in this chapter. It works the same. Select a red note, Shift C selects all the red notes. Select a green note, Shift C obviously selects all the green notes, right? So put this back to the default. Just select the one region in the edit. There you go. So very useful command. Shift and C. Select equal coloured events, which by default, when notes are in colour by velocity, it simply means select everything of the same velocity as the highlighted note. Okay. Alrighty, that leaves just a few things. Alright, let's click this note. Select similar or equal events. Bit of a head scratcher this, so let's select similar events. Yeah? And you sort of scratch your head and thinking, well, what the hell is similar about these other notes as the blue note that I began with? I want to select everything similar to that blue note, so let's do it. Select similar events, and you sort of think, well, what the hell's going on? I mean, why didn't it select this blue note here? Because it's similar. It's got the same velocity, and it's the same, well, almost the same length. So these are all the same velocity. Why didn't similar mean the same velocity, for example? Because that surely is a similarity between this blue note and any other blue note. It doesn't work like that. Select similar events actually means select all other events on the grid that are the same pitch as the selected note or are the same pitch on any other octave. Because if you look, this highlighted note that I began with is on C4. So I highlight it. I now tell Logic to select all similar events. And it's selected everything else on C4, but also these notes down the bottom, which are on C3, and this note up the top on C5. So select similar events actually means select all notes of the same pitch on any octave. Select equal events. Let's choose that one. Select equal events actually just means anything on the same pitch. Okay. So they can be useful, those two. Okay. So that selects similar and equal events. Equal channels, you're never going to use that. Lastly, select equal subpositions. Easy to remember. Shift, because it's a select command, and P for P for positions. Very useful. Select a note. Shift P selects everything on that same start position. Exactly. Shift P. Anything on exactly the same start position is selected. But if I were to move this note fractionally forward by just a couple of ticks, Shift P, nothing is selected, because there's nothing else on that start position. Let me undo that. Command Z, put it back to where it was. Now let's do it. Highlight that note, Shift P, it selects everything. So that's what it means. Select a note, Shift P selects any other note on exactly the same start position in time. In other words, on the same sub position. Alright? So that is your edit menu. Okay, just learn the key commands. Yeah, just learn those, and you will rarely ever need to use this menu, except maybe to do these two. Paste at original position or paste replace. Yeah, or maybe, you know, you might occasionally want to use select overlapped events or similar events, but yeah, so just learn those key commands. And be aware of your undo history, which also can be cleared. You can delete everything in it. Alright, so that's the edit menu. That wasn't that hard, was it? And don't worry, because the shortcut menus, they're mostly copies of those things. Alright. Okay, so that's the edit menu. Let's now move on, look at the view menu. We've covered most of this already, so this will be very quick. We've covered about velocity and region colours for the notes. MIDI channel colours, forget that. Scroll to selection, forget that. Global tracks and configure global tracks, forget that. Scroll in play and auto zoom, well, both about as much use as a chocolate teapot, to be honest. I mean, scroll in play, just to show you what it does, right? Let me extend my cycle range out like this. Okay, let's say that I was working on a very long region or a cluster of regions inside a 3-bar cycle range, right? So with walking playhead guy on, we know that what happens is the playhead moves along, and when it gets to the end it jumps. You know, the whole edit screen jumps to show you the next bit like this. Okay, and jump, and jump, and jump, etc. If you put scroll in play on, what happens is it still scrolls along, but what happens is the playhead stays centered and the background scrolls rather than jumping each time. Yeah, like that. You may find that useful. I don't. I prefer to just turn off walking playhead guy and just have in my edit window what it is that I want to edit. Okay, but anyway, be aware of it. Scroll and play, not a lot of use. Even more useless is auto zoom, and here I'm going to have a little bitch at Apple, right? I mean, for God's sake, what are they playing at? So auto zoom, it's there as a function, and for how long has it been a function, I would ask? Okay, well, check this out. The idea of it is say you're whatever you're zoomed into. Okay, piano roll is closed, so you go to this region, you double click, auto zoom is off, it's zoomed to whatever you last were zoomed at. Okay, put auto zoom on, close the piano roll. The idea is that you double click, it opens piano roll with the region zoomed in to fit. But look, it doesn't fit. Look at it. It doesn't fit. It's just over by about ½ centimetre. So, you know, if walking playhead guy's on, watch, it jumps around. Well, I mean, it can do. I mean, it doesn't fit exactly is the point. Yeah, not really. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit sloppy. You'd think eMagic would Apple would fix it so that, you know, auto zoom would zoom it in the same as Command Alt Z to zoom the cycle range, for example. But even that's got a slight little bug, which is that you do Command Alt Z, and sure enough, it fits your cycle range to the edit window, but always it jumps like that. So there's this little gap at the end, and you always have to manually correct it by dragging it that way. Ludicrous, isn't it? But there you go. Anyway, that's what these two things do, and I don't use them. Okay, we looked at this velocity region colours, MIDI channel colours. You never will use that unless, for example, I don't know, you're using external MIDI instruments maybe a multi-timbral instrument or something, and you're editing multiple MIDI channel notes in the same region on the same track, in which case you could set the notes to be by MIDI channel, but you know, we've been into that. It's hardly used, forget it. Global tracks, I said we're not going to bother with that. Event float, I'll leave that, hang on, because that is the only useful thing in it really. Piano roll colours, well, we looked at that already. That is useful, but you only use it once in a blue moon to adjust your grid and the colours of your grid, etc. Right? And then you have the hyperdraw menu. God knows why Apple still keep it in this view menu, because well, you could open your hyperdraw here, can't you? And you've got the same menu. I suppose they could argue that you go to the view menu, hyperdraw, choose, I don't know, modulation. It'll open your hyperdraw with modulation ready. I suppose it's a bit of a shortcut, isn't it? But anyway, we'll leave all that till we get to hyperdraw, which is next. I'll explain hyperdraw to you. So really, apart from changing from velocity to region colours if you're editing multiple regions in the same edit, and apart from colouring your grid with this thing we looked at already, the only useful thing in the view menu is the event float, which is incredibly useful. Alright, let's quickly look at the old event float. Okay, event float is super cool because you bring it up and it floats. You can position it anywhere you like, and no matter what is active, it floats. But it's not big enough to get in the way really. But event float is super cool. You highlight a note, and this little event float gives you every bit of information about that note. Okay, you've got these 4 decimal places here at the beginning. That is the position of the note, 3rd bar, 1st beat, 4th division, 98 ticks into that division. Okay. It tells you what type of event it is. It's a note. It tells you the channel it's on, its pitch, and this is its velocity, and that is its length. So the beauty of this is that you can use event float, you can highlight a note, and then you can drag it backwards and forwards in time by ticks, by just dragging up and down on the ticks value, back and forward in time by divisions, if you drag on the divisions value, backward and forward in time by beat, if you drag the beat value, and even by bar if you were editing across multiple bars. And the beauty of this is that it works whether or not it ignores the snap here. So if your snap is in division snap to absolute value, you can still move this around by divisions by simply dragging up and down on divisions, and it moves by the division if you drag here on the divisions, and ignores the fact that snap to absolute value is on. So it won't snap to the division lines, right? So fantastic, the event float. You can also drag on the pitch to change the note's pitch up and down. You can also drag on the velocity up and down to change that. And you can even drag on the length to drag the note length as well. Really, really useful event float. Get to know it. And in case you're wondering what this little note icon is at the end, if you click that, it changes to time rather than bars, beats, divisions and ticks. It changes to SIMPTY time for the note start position and SIMPTY time for the end position. Again, that can be adjusted, but it's in SIMPTY time now. Okay, alright, so you'd normally have it like this in note, bar, beats and divisions and ticks. Event float. Get to know it. It's your friend. Position it anywhere. Very, very useful for seeing all the values of a note, and they can even be adjusted. Great. What about if you highlight a cluster of notes? Oh look, you can even change the entire lot in pitch. Okay. And length, velocity, and length, all relative, and position. All relative either in ticks, divisions, beats or bars. Again, by the value. Yeah, fantastic. Alright, so event float, that's really cool. So that's your view menu. Hyperdraw, all these commands we'll look at when we do hyperdraw next. Alright, so that's your edit and your view menu. That just leaves functions. I can take a little break now and have a cup of tea. And that'll make a little break in the edit. and I'll come back and do this functions menu because it's a little bit bigger than some of the others. And although a lot of these things are we'll rarely if ever use them, I think it's important you do understand, especially transform. Okay, otherwise there's not a huge amount. So I'll just take a quick cup of tea break and I'll come back and finish off the functions menu, and then all we have to do is the shortcut menus, which, to be honest, there's only 2 things in there that are different to what we've already looked at. Alright, so I'll just have a quick cup of tea and I'll come back and finish off the functions menu and then the shortcuts.